Hey guys, welcome to Saturday Morning Science. Woohoo! We don't have Saturday morning cartoons anymore, but we have Saturday morning science. For those of you who are experiencing morning right now, you may not have morning where you are. It might be evening. So Saturday night science. Saturday night's all right for science. You know, that should be a song by the great Elton John. Somebody petition him to make Saturday night's all right for science. Getting our GC mess back on, you know. Because that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how it is that the Impossible Burger became possible. So let me say hi to some of you folks in the chat. We got Brainary. Brainary is a thank you for being here. And Bull is with us, hanging out, doing his thing in the back. So am I freezing? Uh-oh. Am I freezing?
Something kind of gave there for a second. You're fine now.
Okay. So
I don't know what
all right.
happened
So
there.
today, you know, I updated to faster internet because they made it possible. So I think it's 200 megs per second. I think that's what I got now. I'm a tech derp, kind of bit, according to Tatted Philosophy Billy from the Geek Room. So
She froze again. You froze again.
I don't know. I don't know what's happening. I can refresh. Should I refresh, you think?
I think you'll be okay. We'll see if it happens again. Just leave it.
Okay, just leave it. So, ironically, it's really hot where I am, but there's a big freeze going on with my internet, I guess, which is weird. It shouldn't be a big freeze because I've paid for the fastest stuff that's come out about it recently through the FDA about clearing some of their some of the things associated with the impossible burger, which is now possible. Nothing's impossible, including this burger. And so we're going to talk a bit about what's going on with it because there's a lot of criticism coming out about that. It's like, what is this stuff exactly? You know, what's it made of? Is it weird? You know, because it's not an actual meat thing, but it bleeds and sizzles just like a burger. So I guess we can go ahead and get started on talking about possible burger that's entirely possible. I think I'm freezing again. Should I refresh?
You're not freezing as far as I can tell.
Oh, great. Well, maybe it's just on my end and my display is all screwed up, and that's completely entirely possible as well. All right. So what are we going to talk about when we're talking about the plant burger, this impossible burger? We're going to talk about what it is. You know, how does it work? Are there health issues involved, and where can I find it? Well, the bottom one is pretty easy to sort because a lot of fast food restaurants currently offer the Impossible Burger. So they have, I think there's Burger King, there's White Castle. You can get the Impossible Burger just about anywhere. And more recently, it's going to be piloted in grocery stores starting this month. It might already be available in your local grocery store. So where you can find it, we've already knocked that out. So let's have the breakdown of what the Impossible Burger is. Made with triffids. Bet it's made with triffids. I don't even know what triffids are. Are they like truffles? Or are they like mushrooms? Well, put your bets in. Put your bets in now because I'm doing a big reveal. What is the Impossible Burger? The breakdown. It's made meat from plants. Whoa. How is that possible? It tastes like meat, but it's made from different types of plants. There's something called plant blood. Now, this is key in what that meat flavor is, and it's found primarily in soy. Now, the flavor compound makeup is very similar to beef. So how did that come about? I will tell you. Science and all that. That's what we do here. Let's see, the FDA approved recently selling it direct to consumers through grocery stores. So let's dive in a bit, and I'm going to address some of the questions in the chat. Let's see, triffids are fake animal plants from a book TV series. Fake animal plants. Okay, so let's dive in a little bit about some of this, and I'm going to address some of the questions in the chat. Well, let's see. Anywhere in the U.S., yes, you can find it pretty much anywhere in the U.S. right now. Major get all of these particular compounds, so we synthesize them in the lab. Synthetic isn't necessarily a bad thing as long it's the same. So it's Soylent Green. Is it though? Is it though? I did have an interesting discussion once with PZ Myers on ethical cannibalism. It's probably one of my favorite conversations I've had on this particular show. Would he eat meat that was grown from human stem cells? And he said yes. Yes, he would. So technically, that may be a thing in the future, growing meat from human stem cells. But I would think that there's other ways that we could use stem cell science, to help with that. Is it GMO'd? Well, just everything you eat is GMO'd. That's been the history of agriculture. They just took the slower route rather than the faster route, which is in the lab. Corn naturally occurs, like little teeny tiny short things. Bananas were really, really small. So over time, they selected for the larger things and bred the larger things together, and then it grew larger and larger. So GMOs are actually extremely important, particularly when we consider the cost of food down the road and being able to feed people, So when we're talking a bit about the Impossible Burger, so the Impossible Burger is a competitor to Beyond Meat that has been on the market for a while now. So you might have seen Beyond Meat. I think it's been over the course of a couple years. And their particular, and I'm not focusing so much on Beyond Meat because it's pretty well documented, a lot of the stuff that they do. And their particular formula has kind of changed a little bit over time. But I'm going to be looking mostly at the Impossible Burger. So the vegetarian and vegan market is a bit of a niche market of some degree, but it is gaining more exposure, particularly in the news, with climate change being a consideration for shifting our dietary habits to something more sustainable, plant-based meat. Now, perhaps one of the issues with becoming vegetarian or vegan is the lack of meat flavor in that particular diet. So introduce Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods. These companies have scienced the crap out of plant-based protein to deliver burgers that taste like beef. But how does this work? I'm going to focus primarily on the Impossible Burger, as it recently jumped a hurdle through FDA approval for their plant-based hemoglobin found in soy that bleeds, sizzles, and tastes just like a beef burger. Now, all of my sources are at the end of this particular talk, this presentation, and readily available on my website, scientistmel.com/resources. You can download all the slides that I have here. You can use them to help educate others. Just, toss a little nod my way, maybe leave up the science of ScientistMel or whatever. It's free for you to use to help educate your loved ones, your friends, your colleagues, anybody. Maybe you want to have a part of a health expo about climate change and you want to talk about the science of impossible meat. You can use my stuff. It's there for you. Teachers use my stuff, and I'm happy to make that available to you on scientistmel.com/resources. And my website is currently being reorganized. My godless journey at home. I need to hit you up and see how that's going. Anywho, I'm very, very grateful for the people who help me do the things I do, including Bullionator and Peter. Gonna go for it. Doc, who's on my show tomorrow. So do check out Doc Savage. He's doing PvP tonight, so I'm going to throw that out there with Omni Eris, who was on the show a few weeks ago. Do check that out. Yes, leg hemoglobin. So I think it's either ledge or leg hemoglobin. I'm not certain how to pronounce that. I did not look it up. I know how to say hemoglobin, And I'm like, so it's leg hemoglobin or leg hemoglobin. I think leg is easier to say for me, so I might just go with that route. Anywho, do check out tomorrow we have Dr. Stephen Hobbs to talk about cryptozoology on Worldacity. It's more of a grown-up type of show because there's sweary language in there and it's comedy. So if you want to check out something funny, check out that show. And Doc will be on PvP tonight on Omni Eris's channel. So go check out that. That's even more adulty stuff, so it's like if it's in leg, it's leg as in legume. That's probably it. Legumes. That would make sense. See, microbloganism, you are just making so much sense. I have not finished my coffee, so I'm going to blame that for not thinking clearly. So what are we going to talk about? What is the science here with the Impossible Burger? How is it made? Also, is it healthier than a regular burger from a fast food joint? So let's check out this hemoglobin. So essentially, what we're looking at is we've got leg hemoglobin. It's a soy-based heme that's kind of found in the roots of soybeans. It's similar to beef. And in beef, heme is the hemoglobin. It's kind of like blood, essentially. So this is where a lot of the, with the FDA approval was whether or not they could consider this additive for direct to consumer purchase, which is recently happened, I believe the end of July. The FDA approved this. So let's talk a minute, kind of dig down about this leg hemoglobin. Now, hemoglobin is found in all kinds of different places you wouldn't think. It isn't just in animals. This discovery was found through Impossible Foods, but plants don't necessarily bleed like animals. So this Impossible Burger bleeds, sizzles, has all kinds of stuff that's indicative of an actual hamburger, but, it's made primarily, exclusively with plants. So the hemoglobin was found in small amounts in soy roots. This hemoglobin that we see is similar in shape to what we see in animals. So it's all the same. It's very similar in structure. And we'll have a comparison of what we call crystal structures. Crystal structures are essentially the structures of things. So you can get like crystal structures of various enzymes, antigens, proteins. And essentially it just kind of shows you how they're all put together and what the shape of them are. So we'll use our eyes and we'll compare the two structures and see how they're similar. And here's the thing. There were several heme options that were explored, but the plants known as glycine max, aka soybeans, contain the closest amino acid sequence to an animal heme, being about 80% similar. So 80% of the plant's hemoglobin is similar to that of beef. Now, so for all intents and purposes, the Impossible Plant Burger tastes like meat because the flavor protein is 80% similar in that of meat protein. So what do you think about that, Bull? 80% similar. Would you eat an Impossible Burger?
Well, I eat a banana, and that's 50% similar to me, so I guess yes.
Yes, people are 50% similar to bananas. But this is a single protein. It's not a whole. It's not. Now, the plant burger isn't 80% cow, but the flavor is 80% cow. But it's not cow, it's plants. So that's the thing when you get into vegetarianism, do you want to get down to the amino acid level on similarities? Because when it comes right down to it, yeah, you can. You're like, well, it's 80% similar to the amino acid sequence of beef blood, so, or at least beef hemoglobin, which is found primarily, the type that they use is myoglobin, which is found in tissues. So it's kind of like, So is it Braguin? As long as it doesn't set off my gut like most plant foods do. Sure. Well, we're going to talk about all of the ingredients of the Impossible Burger, and the different things that some critics are kind of throwing out there because they're scared. They're afraid. All right. So let's look at plant heme and animal heme. Let's take a look at how they look. So these are crystal structures. So these particular things are two different crystal structures. You can go and have a look. And something that I did when I was in grad school, particularly in computational chemistry, you can go on a crystal structure website. All of these are posted and available to you. And you can kind of manipulate these in like a 3D type of simulation to where you can kind of compare and contrast between the two proteins yourself and have a go. I can't remember the website right off the top of my head, but just type in protein crystal structures database into Google and it should pop right up. Now, certain softwares, if you are currently a student at the university, you should be able, or even an alumni, sometimes alumni have access to this stuff. You can go and get Mo software. I think that's molecular orbital environment or something. Molecular, I forget the O. I just always called it Mo. See, I'm terrible. I'm terrible sometimes.
I don't know if you're aware of the Folding at Home project by Stanford.
Ooh, is it? I think Foldit, 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 that program.
No, Folding at Home. What it is distributed computing that relates to they're refolding proteins basically by utilizing the idle time in everyone's computer while their saver is running.
Technical difficulties, please stand by.
Okay, it went back on.
It went back on.
Yay.
All right. Oh my goodness. Are we back on? All righty. So, hopefully you guys are fine. We fell off for a second, but we're back again. You know, it happens to the best of us. All right. So with the Impossible Burger, what we're looking at here, there's something called Foldit, and it's a video game. Yeah, I'm sorry it was crashing again. Boo. Boo. You know, I upgrade. I think this is just one of those things. I upgrade my internet, and then the universe, for whatever reason, it's like chaos theory. Me upgrading my internet over the phone somehow set into a series of events of all kinds of other crap to happen. That's what that was, Bull. So we'll just say it was that in that particular thing. I'll just say that. I'll just throw that out there. Anyway, so Foldit, Fold-it, Foldit or all together. Google that and Google that with protein folding. You can join a whole bunch of different people who have aided scientists in trying to find the lowest energy conformation shape of various proteins to help them sort out, particularly when you're dealing with, you know, like orphan receptors or stuff like that. They'll have different proteins that they don't have crystal structures for yet, meaning they don't know how 100% they're shaped, but they've designed this program to kind of go through, and you can spend time trying to twist the proteins around to get it into the best possible guess, so to speak, of what that shape would be like. That allows people doing wet lab stuff to be able to go through and say, okay, we're going to work with this protein. We think it's this particular shape. They can kind of run with it and say, okay, what kind of, you know, if we're talking about receptors, what kind of thing would set off a receptor like that? So do check that out. Foldit. It's a cool game. If you're a video gamer, have a go with that, and you can help real science going on. So what we're looking at here on the left is the leg hemoglobin, and on the right is myoglobin. Now, myoglobin is found in the muscle tissue of animals. And we're back. Yay. So myoglobin is found in the tissue of animals. And so myoglobin is, as you can see, we've got a lot of the similar structures between the two. You notice a lot of these look like little curly ribbons going all around. So these are kind of placed into the same direction to where certain groups you would find when you're comparing the two. So what we see here are similar shapes, albeit one side is all blue, green, and yellow. That's just to kind of highlight different sequences of amino acids and how they make their little tendril ribbons. And so, but when you're looking at it, it's very, very similar in shape between the two. Those are alpha helices. You're right, microorganism. So we have really nice alpha helices. We have, not really any beta sheets going on, but we do have alpha helices, which is very common. Beta sheet makes the kind of tends to be like the ribbons are straight. They're kind of flat and they go in different directions sometimes. But that's essentially what the crystal structures look like. So plant heme looks very similar to animal heme, doesn't it? I could just look at crystal structures all day. They're so neat and pretty. It might be fun. You know what I should consider? I should consider doing for our science communication work out at the local natural history museum here. They do Christmas trees. They do Christmas trees where you can go and donate and do a donation and have a Christmas tree from your organization there. And the money funds local children's hospitals. So I think I should probably at some point in time do a crowd fund and do a Christmas tree of nothing but different proteins, crystal structures, printed out like that with ribbons and say, here's leg hemoglobin, here's myoglobin. How cool would that be? Because they're so pretty. Could do an entire tree of nothing but science, mostly protein crystal structures. I think that would be great. So, oh my goodness, I want one. Anyway, yeah, I want one too. It is a pretty structure. It'd be fun if we discovered right hand turning amino acids. There'd be challenges to eat all over the place. Probably that might be a thing, but we got to think about how the stomach works. So let's talk about the science of the Impossible Burger. Let's talk about the science of the Impossible Burger. What we're dealing with are recombinant proteins. That's a bit of my jam because I worked in recombinant proteins in industry. And I'll kind of talk a bit more about that in just a second. They identified aroma and flavor compounds through a technology called GC mass spec, gas chromatography and mass spectrum. I just say mass spec because the word is hard to say. We'll just say mass spec. So it's mixed. Okay. Essentially, the Impossible Burger is made with soy and wheat protein, coconut oil, and potatoes. So let's catch up on the chat a little bit. And I'm going to discuss for you how recombinant proteins work, GC mass spec for aroma and flavors. And also we're going to talk about the potatoes, soy, wheat, coconut oil, and all the other things combined to make the burger. So when we're talking about recombinant proteins, well, first of all, once they found the leg hemoglobin, they were like, okay, it's not in a lot. There's not a lot to be had from soy base, from soy in general. It's a very, very, very small amount. So it's not really conducive to use up an entire plot of farmland to collect such a minuscule amount of leg from these particular roots of soy plants. They've okay, what are we going to do here? This is a naturally produced type of hemoglobin, but we don't want to knock out lots of farmland to grow all of these plants, then process all these plants, and then extract all of this leg hemoglobin. That Pichia pastoris. There we go. See, words are hard for me to say sometimes, so I'm not particularly Are we frozen again? Did it crash? I think it crashed again, Bull. Did it? Did it
No,
crash
it's
again?
going on my end.
It's going on your end?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess it's probably freezing sometimes. So essentially, rather than take up entire plots of land to grow all of these soy plants, they're going to just generate it in a lab. It's the same protein, but what they do is they genetically modify yeast to produce that particular protein. Because remember, genetic sequences, DNA, RNA, all of that can be essentially put into certain organisms, and they'll read that sequence and make that protein. This is why retroviruses are a thing. Retroviruses can, once you gain a retrovirus, you can't get rid of it because of the fact it goes in and can genetically change your DNA. Big old chunks of our human DNA has viral DNA in it. So even though viruses aren't human, our cells can still read all of that genetic code and make the proteins associated with the virus. But we can do the same thing with yeast. We can genetically modify yeast to make this leg hemoglobin. So that's what they did. And it's a lot cheaper. You can then take that particular protein, whether it's put in, whether it comes up in the cell or in the cellular extracellular matrix. That means, does it release it out into outside of itself, or does it make it within itself? There are two different things you got to do. Then all you got to do is pull that protein out, and you can do it through chromatography. It's not that difficult, particularly if you have something on the end of it called a his tag. His tags are amazing because they can attach explicitly and exclusively to something that we call a nickel column. And so that little protein, and I don't know if that's what they do here, I'm just saying, hypothetically speaking, if they did, then that it's like 99% clean, man, for real. If you have a his tag on a protein, you use a nickel column, it's going to flush everything else out. That little protein is going to stick to the nickel inside your little column. And I'm going to show you what that looks like for column chromatography. That's what gas chromatography is, but this would be liquid. So they probably use an HPLC. Instrumentation's my jam, guys, like for real. I know lots about that. Anyway, so it's not that difficult. It's a lot cheaper, and you're talking about using stuff that's in one single lab, and you can mass produce it. It's a lot easier, it's a lot cheaper, and it's better for the environment than taking up entire plots of land just to grow soy. All right, GC mass spec. What they did is they wanted to be able to replicate a lot of the scents, the smells, the aromas that come out of a burger while you're cooking it, that charcoal-y type of smell, you know. They want to be able to replicate that in the Impossible Burger. So what do? You do something called gas chromatography mixed with mass spectroscopy. I believe it's mass spectroscopy. Yes. So, and what you do is you essentially take those particular aromas that are coming off of the burger, you run it through a gas chromatography column. Those particular things that we smell, then it passes through a series of loops, and I'll show you the setup here in a second. And then you're able to actually break down and see the different ion forms of the compound on a chromatogram. And I'll show you what that looks like. There's an entire database just on mass spectroscopy where it prints out the pattern of how this particular compound breaks up into ions, and you're able to compare it with well, there's maybe some issues, some false positives associated with a mass spec chromatogram, but they're getting better at updating the system, and there are other tests that you can do to test to make certain that same compound. So once you've figured out what the compound is, you can synthesize it in the lab. Then you get your sweet smelling scents that come off of a burger where there is no meat. That's how they did that with the aroma and flavors. Now, potatoes, coconut oil, soy, and wheat proteins were used along with the hemoglobin and other types of preservatives to kind of bring it together to give it that burger juicy flavor. Let's see. I wonder if they have to do anything to prevent the heme protein interfering with the yeast metabolism by binding the oxygen. Here's how it works. What you can do with a particular when you're dealing with those types of proteins, if it's an extracellular type of thing, then that means after the protein is made, protein. Now, if it's inside the cell, I don't think it would be really a thing because it's still kind of like a plant protein, and the amino acid sequence is 80% that of animals. I don't know how that compares to a yeast protein. So you would still have to have you would have to have the same type of structure in order for that to happen, I would think. But if it's an extracellular recombinant protein, then it will be released outside the cell and never actually get involved with any kind of metabolic issues. But that's a good question. I'll dig down a little bit later and see if I can find out a more fleshed out answer for that, for lack of a better term. So you guys kind of want to see what a GC mass spec looks like? Yes, of course we do. My throat is full of stuff. Let me have another sip of coffee. So this is where we get into some chemistry, guys. Chemistry. Totally stuff I know. So this is great. All right. So you have something called a carrier gas. When you're dealing with gas chromatography mass spec, you don't want the gas to interfere with the aroma compounds, do you? You don't want them to react with one another. So what do we use as a carrier gas? A noble gas, because they're boring and don't react with anything. The noble gases, if you're to have a party, the noble gases would be hanging out somewhere else in the room, not interacting with anybody, probably on their phones, because they're
Poindexter. That's who they are.
They're Poindexter, yes. They're just hanging out. They don't bond. They don't react. They're just there. Noble gas. In this particular picture, we have helium. Helium is a noble gas. You will find the noble gases all the way at the end, the last column of your periodic table. All of their valence electrons are full. They have absolutely no reason whatsoever to bond with anyone. They're completely happy in the state that they are, and they don't care. So get you a carrier gas. Helium works in this case with this particular setup. So then your carrier gas, you're going to inject those beef aromas into your instrument. The carrier gas kind of blows it through the chromatography column. You know, if you're looking for a particular protein and you know that it's negatively charged, it has lots of, its overall charge is negative, then you would put positively charged, you know, beads within that particular column. So, well, no, wait. You would put negatively charged. Well, you could do the positively charged if you want to bind the gas that you want and then have the other stuff pass through. Then you can release it by altering the actual charges, altering the pH of whatever you're putting in there. If you wanted to put like a type of, I'm trying to think of this. I've mostly done liquid chromatography, going through and doing gas. Let's assume that you want the stuff to come out. So, because that would make more sense in gas chromatography, the stuff you want to come out. So you use the same charge bead, and so it repels it all the way through, and you end up with a chromatogram. All right, so essentially what that chromatogram is you have something that's called an ionizer. And so that particular ionizer will go through and it will break up your compound of interest into various sizes. Now, there are certain ions that it'll make a large abundance of based on how it breaks apart, because certain bonds are weaker than other bonds within the protein. So if you have like particularly strong bonds between certain amino acids, they're less likely to form ions. The weaker ones, though, you know, those little sections, so you'll have sections of your protein, and that's what comes out on the chromatogram, those different sections of protein, and it's based on mass. which means those mass of those amino acids are there. You can get the total mass of each one. So if you're trying to figure out what a compound is, that breakup pattern in coordination with the mass, you can run that through a particular database, find another chromatogram and compare and go, oh, hey, look, this is a type of aroma XYZ. How do I know that? It matches up in this database. Then you can run additional tests to kind of verify whether or not that particular compound is the one. So that's kind of how gas chromatography works. Took me a second. I'm mostly used to HPLC, liquid chromatography, where you would have the altering in pH. You really wouldn't worry too much about that with gas chromatography because it's gas. Duh, Melody. Anywho, it's early, so we've talked a bit about GC mass spec. Any questions? Hey, Nether, you just missed the talk about GC mass spec, man. But you can essentially whatever you put in your GC column, you want to bind the stuff that you don't want. And then the gas that you want, the aromas that you want come throughout the other side. That would be like the best course of action with that. And you usually have like a protector column because those columns can crack pretty easily and you don't want to do that. Protector columns are a thing. All right, let's talk about how they make the recombinant proteins because there were lots of questions about that. So this is kind of what happens when you go from DNA to protein. So here we have a type of yeast cell. Now, different yeasts can be induced by different chemicals to make certain proteins. So sometimes methanol is a trigger. You start to introduce methanol to your yeast culture. That signals the protein recombination process to kind of go through. So you get the methanol introduction kind of triggers those yeast cells to go, okay, now we are going to make this protein. And then that causes the series of events to occur to where they start making the messenger RNA. So what they do is you have this promoter gene that's introduced, and that goes into this ribosome. And so you have the messenger RNA, if you remember from your biology. Your messenger RNA is kind of like the recipe for the amino acid sequence that you need in its order in order to make it. So the ribosome then goes through and it reads that message, and then it starts pulling in amino acids within the yeast cell, and they put them in the order according to that particular strain. And then you end up with your protein, and the protein starts to fold in its appropriate ways, and then it can be secreted or it can be in little bubbles. It just depends on the type of yeast that you're using, and then it releases it usually into the extracellular matrix. If it's inside of the yeast cells, that's a bit different. You have to bust up those yeast cells in something called a dynomill. It sounds like dinosaurs, but it's not nearly as exciting, and it doesn't make dinosaurs. But that's essentially what you do. You bust up these yeast cells, and then you go through liquid chromatography to remove those particular proteins that you want, which we talked a little bit about earlier. GC mass spec is vastly different than liquid chromatography. I was mixing the two just a little bit ago when I was talking about pH. It's not the same. So I was wrong there. See, I'm wrong sometimes, and that's all right. So let's look a little bit at the magic mix. There's a good article on Wired about the Impossible Burger. They went through and they kind of went to the company and broke it down a little bit, like, hey, what are the materials you use to make this burger? Now, they have potatoes, they have soy and wheat, and they also have heme. They have the different flavors, and they use coconut oil So for the with the coconut flavor removed, that gives the fat for the burger. Yes, proteins are also refined and further modified inside vesicles and Golgi apparatus of the cell. Yes, so they do go through those further modifications for appropriate folding and that sort of thing. So the potatoes help with water retention, being able to absorb water and hold in a bit of moisture. The soy and wheat give it that chewy meat type of material, that plant hemoglobin, that leg hemoglobin. That's essentially the biggest part of the flavor. The coconut oil is needed to make the fattiness of a hamburger. And then you mix in a few of the preservatives and the flavors that they had when they found from the GC mass spec research, you get your Impossible Burger. But what about nutrition? That's a biggie. That's a biggie. So essentially, that's a biggie. Is it healthier than beef? Is this healthier than beef? So let's look at some statistics. So is meatless fast food really healthier for you? So this particular infogram, pictogram, what do you call this? What do you call this? An infogram? Is that what it is? I don't know what you call this.
I call that a nutrition label, but
well, this is from well, the nutrition label is a little bit different, but it has nutrition information. So Market Watch went through and they did a little analysis and they compared the nutritional value of various Impossible Burgers from different fast food restaurants compared to their beef version. And so Burger King, we're looking at 630 calories for the Impossible Whopper and then 660 calories for the regular Whopper. There's 11 grams of saturated fat versus 12. It has a higher content of sodium and it has almost the same amount of grams of protein as the Whopper. Let's see, the McDonald's McVegan burger. And you know, the Impossible Whopper is about $1 more, but they can vary per location. So this was comparing at a single, a single location for each one, or maybe for a particular area for a town. So the price for a McVegan is $5.80. So that's a whole $1.80 more. It's less calories than the Big Mac. It has less fat. It has considerably less saturated fat than the Big Mac. I mean, considerably, no, it's about the same. It has considerably less saturated fat than like the Whopper, the Impossible Whopper, but pretty close to the same as the Big Mac. Able to get a sodium count on that, but it has a lot less protein than the Big Mac. And then the Impossible Slider. Higher sodium content, higher calories, higher fat, higher saturated fat, but more protein. And then they have the Beyond Taco. That's from the Beyond Meat. $1 more, calories are the same amount of fat, roughly the same amount of saturated fat, 100 milligrams more in sodium, and approximately the same amount of protein. Yes, they could likely cut down on the saturated fat, but here's the thing you got to think about. You can have a burger and it not be 660 calories outside of a fast food joint. What you put on it is particularly important as well. This is holistically considering bun and cheese and sauces and everything else that goes into that. If they cook it in patties and how the patties relate to one another. So the Beyond Burger patty, just the patty, nothing else added to it, versus like the Impossible Burger patty. We have roughly the same amount of calories, off by 30. There's more fat in the Beyond Burger than the Impossible Burger, but there's more saturated fat in the Impossible Burger. Saturated fat is bad for you in that, if you're not familiar, I don't have any Legos with me. That's weird. I have some over there. But what happens is saturated fat, and trans fat in particular, is really bad. Fat can like stick into the sides of your blood vessels, and so can saturated fat to a degree a little bit. Trans fat in particularly, yes, that's what causes that clogging of your arteries. But saturated fat, that means all of the carbons have hydrogens on them, and they all go across the top and the bottom. There's no bends in the molecule at all. There's no twisty bends. They're like little bricks. The molecule is like a little brick. So if you have saturated fat, a lot of it, it'll stack on itself like a bunch of flat Legos. This is bad because this causes blockages in your arteries. Saturated fat's not so great for you. And trans fat's even worse because it might have a little twist or bend. But then if that gets stuck in one of your arteries, then that just makes a perfect little door for everything else to stack right on top of it. That's trans fat. That's worse for that reason. So when we're dealing with saturated fat versus trans fat, both are bad, but for similar reasons. Let's look at the Burger King beef patty. The patty by itself is the same amount of calories as an Impossible Burger patty, but it has way more cholesterol. It doesn't have any carbs in it, has less sodium, and, it's about the same amount of protein, and it has way more fat than an Impossible Burger. So it's something to consider. The Impossible Burger isn't necessarily healthier for you. In some respects, it kind of is with the lack of cholesterol, but you have to consider the saturated fat. So let's catch up on the chat a bit and talk a bit about what's going on here. I don't know what the glycemic index is for the Impossible Burger, but you could probably look it up. It might be high. You do have some carbs there, but if you're looking at carb intake versus protein intake, if you're worried about that, maybe the Impossible Burger isn't right for you. But if you're also concerned about cholesterol, you have to limit your cholesterol intake. The Impossible Burger is an option. Just consider how you prepare it. Don't really want to add a lot of cheese to it. Be careful about the type of sauces you use. Good options are all kinds of different mustards. There are a lot of mustards that don't really, unless it's honey mustard, but there's mustards out there that don't have a lot of sugar in them, and some are considered 0 calories. So consider how the prep is, because the prep is particularly important. If you add a lot of stuff to it, that's why I never understood if I go to certain restaurants and I get like a taco salad at like an actual restaurant, they'll pour a lot of cheese sauce on top of the salad. And I'm like, what? This is I like white cheese sauce as much as the next person, but I don't want it on my salad. I'm eating the salad because I'm trying to increase my vegetable intake without necessarily increasing my fat intake and calorie intake. I'd much rather have the calories and the actual meat that's in there for me. Well, I'm not vegetarian or vegan. I do enjoy soy burgers from time to time, but I get the soy burgers that don't have a lot of the saturated fats in them. And yes, Nether, you do need some unsaturated fats by a diet, and too much can be bad for you too. You don't want a whole lot of fats in general, but moderation is key. I often take, because I don't want a high intake of fats, I don't want a high intake of sugar, I do take flaxseed oil supplements. Omega-3s are still really important. So I get some of my fat intake from avocados and things of that nature because it's more of a quality fat. There's other things there that, help with skin and brain. And, you do need some fats in order to make certain hormones, but too much is not good. So here's where we teach moderation is key, guys. If you're eating 4 Impossible Burgers a day from Burger King, may not be a good idea. 3 a day may not be a good idea. Sometimes food, why not? But keep in mind, it's 660 calories, and that's about half of what I eat in a day on average. Sometimes I get up to as much as 15 to 1700, but that's also considering activity. So you're going to be the best advocate for your health and understanding what it is that you feel is within your parameters for your particular lifestyle. And that's kind of where we come in here, where we talk about the different things associated with that. Some critics of this plant-based burger have said that the plant hemoglobin used may not be a good idea, given that this is now a relatively new additive to the human diet. These critics are worried that there are health risks not yet discovered within the plant heme. Now, bear in mind, how food is processed in the gut is important to consider. This heme is broken down just like any other heme the stomach encounters. Also remember that this particular hemoglobin is 80% the same amino acid sequence as animal heme. We looked at the crystal structures. They're very similar. The risk of any side effects associated with consumption is going to be exceedingly low. However, with that said, if you're allergic to any components of the Impossible Burger, don't eat it. Don't eat it. Oh my goodness. Now, good morning, Bang Fizz and Microbloganism, Brian Stevens and Nether and Bragwin, and I know Brainiary was here earlier. Now I'm wondering how to genetically modify yeast into producing cheese. Ethics Commission, please stop me. Well, I mean, maybe you can make isn't it, you start out with milk and then you curdle it, Well, we have, can you think of beer cheese? Maybe beer cheese is a thing where you have like micro-brewed beers. Maybe you can have micro-brewed type of cheese sorts of things where you go through and you age the milk or the dairy product with yeast and, collect the fluid. Maybe, I don't know. Nether. These are so many different things. Gosh. But anywho, I digress. I like cheese too. I had some feta earlier today. Playing Astroneer while listening. That's cool. So there is lots of research that's being done on gut biome and how it affects your health. So I do also take probiotics. Even though I still try to eat yogurt and stuff, I find that my balance for my natural microbiome is very easily affected by what I eat. Or my mood and things like that. Stress is a thing. So I still take a probiotic every day, just in case. It's all right, but I don't take too many. I just one. That's all I need. Homemade cheese are a thing. Yeah, they are. They are. So we've got to wrap it up. This has been awesome. So let's go with the breakdown. You guys are killing it today. We've been doing great. So let's kind of go back to the breakdown. Try the Impossible Burger. I have had the Impossible Burger, and I enjoyed it. I thought it tasted really good. You can get vegan options, including vegan cheese, vegan mayonnaise, and vegan bread if you are the person who is the vegan sort. That's available to you at various restaurants. So it tastes like meat, but it's made from plants. Plant blood, this plant hemoglobin, this leg hemoglobin is key in the meat flavor, and it comes from soy. The flavor compound makeup is very beef. And most recently, at the end of July, FDA approved selling Impossible Burger meat direct to consumer with the additive of the leg hemoglobin. Some pushback is on that from different consumer reports groups that are saying, but we need more research on this. Is this going to hurt people? It's a fair question, but considering that the structure is extremely similar to that of animal hemoglobin, probably not likely to be a thing. However, if you are allergic to soy or wheat or potatoes or coconut oil or any types of preservatives like xanthan gum or the like, look at the back of the Impossible Burger nutrition label. If you're allergic to any of those things, don't eat it. Health first. So, what were the questions we covered? The plant burger, Impossible Burger. What is it? How does it work? Are there health issues? Where can I find it? Pretty much everywhere now. Thank you for the link, Gut Microbiome and Health and Disease. Thank you for the link, Brian Stevens. So, wrapping this up, where can you find me? ScientistMel. Just Google that and you'll find something. Anywhere you want. ScientistMel.com, patreon.com/ScientistMel, periscope.tv. I think it's periscope.tv/ScientistMel. No .com in that, I don't think. YouTube.com. Most of y'all are watching there. Like, share, and subscribe. Facebook.com. I have Facebookers on there as well. And I'm also on Twitch. All of my resources can be available or made available on ScientistMel.com. I also write articles there. If you like what I do, consider becoming a patron. I do give back to the community. I also donate to research. I also have a shop, ScientistMel.com/shop. A portion of that shop is the Blocked By series. So people who are not very nice on the internet, I generate different, things that they say, and they put it on t-shirts, and all of those proceeds are donated to various charities, including the Trevor Project, the American Anxiety and Depression Association, ACLU, Planned Parenthood, World Wildlife Foundation. PETA has me blocked, so I have an entire PETA series, and all those proceeds go to the World Wildlife Foundation. You know, a group that actually has reacclimation programs for the animals they rescue, and not just a group that goes around euthanizing things because, hey, I think they just enjoy that. I don't understand why they don't put money into reacclimation in their adoption programs. But, they're too busy making commercials because, hey, commercials, it's a brand, not a group. All right. So thank you guys for being here. This has been the Science of Impossible Plant Burger. Go check one out if you want. Let me know what you think. If you have questions, hit me up in the comments. You can find me on Twitter. My DMs are open. Don't be weird, but feel free to message me anytime on there, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Keep in mind, I am a person. I do have a full-time job, and I often work more than 40 hours a week just at my job, usually about 32 in 2 days. So keep this in mind. And I try to respond as quickly as I can to everyone. If not, I'm sorry. I do the best I can with what I've got, just like everybody else. We're all winging it. So be kind to each other. And also, thank you, Tatted Atheist, for my Mr. Rogers. I have a Mr. Rogers Funko Pop. I might have to take him out of the box because I love Mr. Rogers so much. So I'm going to end the show with Mr. Rogers. You always make each day special for me. You know how? A gesture being you. I will see you on Sunday for Oral Audacity with Dr. Stephen Hobbs. And with me, as always, is the incomparable Doc Savage, keeping me focused on the goal, promoting science literacy by ripping apart absolutely nonsensical garbage that's presented as science. We take apart the bad science, and we have a lot of fun doing it. So do check us out tomorrow, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time on here, youtube.com/ScientistMel, and Oral Audacity. Bull, any last thoughts before we sign off?
Well, also remember that before Oral Audacity, there's also the Geek Room Let's Riff tomorrow as well. So, and I produce both. So watch the Geek Room, have a barrel full of laughs about other nonsense, and then come talk about the science nonsense with Doc and Mel.
Yes, and Bull has a Patreon too. And I do pay Bull for his work here. So supporting me, you support him, and you can also support him directly on his own patreon.com/bullyinginator. So we will see you tomorrow. Check out the Geek Room prior to Audacity for a whole completely separate group of fun. I will be on their show, I believe, at the end of this month with a debate opposite Cirrus talking about DC versus Marvel. I'll be in the Marvel camp, and hopefully I'll see you there. Sending squishy science hugs. Bye!